On September 9th, Israel carried out a surprise airstrike inside Doha, the capital of Qatar. 6 people were killed, including a Qatari security officer, while Hamas leaders, Israel's stated target, survived. Now, at first glance, this might look like just another extension of the Gaza war. But in reality, this strike represents something far bigger, because it wasn't inside Gaza, it wasn't in Lebanon, and it wasn't in Syria. It was in Qatar, a wealthy Gulf state, a U.S. major non-NATO ally, and home to Al-Udeid, the largest American military base in the Middle East, and that changes everything. Why is this so geopolitically alarming? To begin with, it undermines the very sovereignty of a nation that the West depends on not only for military basing, but also for mediation. For months, Qatar has been the go-between in ceasefire and hostage talks with Hamas. By striking inside Doha, Israel has effectively cut off, or at least weakened, one of the West's few reliable diplomatic channels. That is why the UN Secretary General condemned it as a flagrant violation, and why Western governments suddenly found themselves scrambling to distance their words from Israel's actions. Then there's energy. Qatar is one of the world's largest exporters of liquefied natural gas. Europe, still trying to pivot away from Russian supplies, relies heavily on Qatari flows. The strike didn't hit LNG facilities, but it raises a dangerous question in insurance markets. If even Doha is no longer safe from foreign strikes, what's the risk premium for shipping, pipelines, and terminals? Prices can jump not only from physical damage, but from the perception of instability. And that perception just got a lot worse. There's also the precedent it sets. Israel has carried out targeted killings and strikes in Lebanon, Syria, and even Iran, but never before in a Gulf ally's capital city. Normalizing extraterritorial strikes in so-called neutral states is destabilizing. It gives other actors, think Iran or its proxies, cover to expand their own retaliation zones. That means more risk, not just for militaries, but for diplomats, aid workers, and energy infrastructure scattered across the region. Inside the West, this creates fractures. Britain's prime minister condemned the strike outright. Washington expressed displeasure, but also admitted it had prior knowledge. That split between condemnation and complicity creates visible cracks in the Western Front. And in geopolitics, cracks are where rival powers wedge themselves in. Which brings us to China and Russia. Just as this strike landed, Beijing hosted the latest Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit. The SCO now boasts 10 full members, a growing list of partners, and even floated the idea of an SCO development bank. It was a moment carefully staged to show that the so-called alternate power bloc is expanding. And then Israel, America's closest ally, strikes inside Qatar, a U.S. partner. For Beijing and Moscow, this is propaganda gold. They can point to Western inconsistency on sovereignty. Washington lectures others about respecting borders, but its allies act with impunity, even in friendly capitals. That narrative plays well with countries already hedging between the West and the new multipolar order. And make no mistake, the Gulf is hedging. Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and Qatar have all deepened economic and technological ties with China, from energy deals to AI and 5G partnerships. A strike like this accelerates that process. If the West cannot guarantee respect for sovereignty, Gulf monarchies will look to China and Russia for balance, financially, diplomatically, and perhaps even in security cooperation. So what happens next? In the best case, Israel frames this as a one-off, Qatar reasserts its sovereignty, and Washington quietly reassures Doha with security guarantees to keep mediation alive. In the baseline, relations remain chilly, ceasefire talks slow down, and China and Russia quietly expand their courtship of Gulf states. In the worst case, copycat cross-border actions erupt, insurance costs spike, European energy security is hit hard, and the center of Middle Eastern mediation shifts out of the Western orbit altogether to Ankara, to Beijing, or to a joint SCO-branded platform. That is why this single airstrike is so worrying. It's not just about Hamas, it's not just about Gaza, and it's not even just about Israel. It's about whether the Western alliance can maintain credibility on sovereignty, whether Europe can keep its energy lifeline stable, and whether the balance of diplomatic power in the Middle East tips away from Washington and London toward Beijing and Moscow. In short, Israel's attack on Qatar has cracked open another fault line in global geopolitics, and the world will feel the tremors in the weeks to come.